Okay, so thank you so much for joining this evening. Thank you, Kirsten, for giving up your time to join me. For those that haven't met me before, my name's Alison Beadle. I am a personal trainer. I'm also a menopause coach. So I studied third age education with a lady called Jenny Burrell. And more recently, she did an evergreen version of the original training, which had lots of like more up to date clips and connections with the kind of specialists in the area. And this is how I met Kirsten, basically. So in my journey, I was listening to a particular information about nutrition. And then there was a whole section on menopause and sugar. And I was like, oh my God, this is my thing. Because I've been sugar free since 2012. And when I say sugar free, I don't eat refined sugar at all. And I moderate my sugar levels. So some people say they're sugar free and they eat loads of fruit and dates and smoothies and agave and coconut blossom and honey and maple syrup. But I actually don't do those at all. I might use a little bit of stevia or erythritol or xylitol to sweeten. And I eat fruit, but I moderate it. So when I say sugar free, that's what I mean by being sugar free. So when I heard this whole kind of thing about sugar and menopause, I thought, wow, this is really cool. I'd like to share this because from a personal experience, I do think it has aided me to having a smooth menopause transition. And I also have a condition called endometriosis as well, which can be exacerbated by sugar because the sugar is a hormone disruptor. And endometriosis is about having too much of one type of hormone, causing kind of overgrowth of cells in all parts of the body. So for me to like cut back on sugar, I do think that's made a difference with my endometriosis as well. I'm very lucky that I don't have to take painkillers and I've only had one bout of surgery. So I figure that's a bit of a win. So that's enough about me. Let me pass you over to Kirsten, and then maybe you can tell us, Kirsten, how you came to where you are today, basically.
Well, I've been a nutritional therapist for 20 years now. And I suppose originally it was about 25 years ago, I had cancer. And prior to that, I had a very poor diet. I wasn't really that interested in nutrition. But then whilst I was in hospital, I had a 3-week stint in hospital. And I just got a little bit obsessed, might be a bit strong, but I was really drawn to making sure that I was eating properly. The hospital food just wasn't doing it for me. But I had friends bringing me in food. I had the hospital chef stopping off on his way to work to buy me some salad every day. It was, I got a real bee in my bonnet about it, essentially. So from there, my husband bought me a really excellent nutrition book called Healing with Whole Foods. And I found a college and I studied, I trained, and here we are. So 20 years later, I work with a lot of people with cancer diagnosis, but that's not all that I do. I have a really strong focus on hormonal health, which incorporates that. So a lot of people with hormonal cancers, but also people that don't have a cancer diagnosis as well. But maybe they're going through menopause or menstrual health problems or fertility issues. Or prostate issues. So I've worked a lot on those levels. And also across the board, with everything, digestive, cardiovascular health, uh, cognitive health issues, skin issues, all the kinds of things that you might consider going to see a nutritional therapist about, and many more besides. So that's where I'm at. I do a lot of teaching. I've written a book. And just love what I do. There's always more to learn. There's always lots that I learn just from going through people's stories with them. When people come for one-to-one consultations and they're telling me their story, there's always so much to learn from that too. So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
me.
I often find when I'm talking to clients, like although I've been, I did my initial personal training qualifications and my third age and pre and postnatal. It's just dealing with people that you actually, learn so much more, and you go away and go, oh, that's that. And then you look some stuff up, and then you ask colleagues, and, it's amazing how much, you think you know stuff, and then you think, wow, I really don't. So you learn so much more. So let's get straight onto the topic. And I think the most important thing I wanted, I thought to share first of all, is about how the body reacts to sugar, and a little bit about kind of insulin resistance, because we hear this battered around a lot, don't we? And we say, oh, like, sugar slumps, sugar highs, sugar slows, and then I think it's important to understand how your body responds to sugar and deals with it. And then I think that really, when I was doing my studying and listening to your information about it, the biggest thing was, when you were saying about, insulin resistance, you explained it so beautifully. Can you explain it to the people out here now?
Okay, I'll give it a shot. So whenever we eat sugar, our body has lots of mechanisms it uses to decide what to do with that sugar. So we can, sugar contains energy that's originally come from the sunshine, actually. So the sun shines on plants, and the plants have their own thing called photosynthesis that helps them get the sunshine into molecules in the plants. And eventually we might eat those molecules that contain that sunshine energy. And then we have lots of convoluted processes that help us to get that sunshine out of those molecules and then into molecules that we can use. So it's a little bit like the plants have made AA batteries to store the energy in. We eat the AA batteries, but we run on AAA batteries. So we have to get the sunshine out of the AA battery, put it into a AAA battery, and then we can power ourselves off those batteries. And the different types of sugar, like glucose and fructose, for example, are they're different types of batteries. So essentially we've got glucose, sucrose, we've got lactose as well, which is a malt sugar. So they're different kinds of batteries, and some of them are kind of stuck together to make battery packs that we can eat. So when we eat those batteries, before we take the sunshine out, our body assesses whether we need the energy right now. And if we do, we'll put that sugar into the cells in our body that needs it, so that they can then go through that convoluted process of getting the energy out. But if we don't need the energy straight away, we'll put that, we'll store it. We can store it in two main ways. One is glycogen, which is a substance in our muscle tissue and in our livers. It's a bit like kind of putting it in the cupboard, so it's easy access. Or we can have a longer term kind of deep freeze storage, which is our fat cells. So we'll convert the sugar to fat, store it in our fat cells. So these are the choices available. And what we do is directed by hormones. In particular, the hormone that you've probably heard about most is insulin. So hormones are messages from different parts of our body to tell other parts of our body to do something or stop doing something, really. So there'll be a message really from our brain that goes down to another part of our body, in this case the pancreas, that then tells the pancreas to send a message out in the form of insulin. So this is like sending a letter in the post. And our cell membranes have insulin receptors. All of our cell membranes have insulin receptors. And these are like letterboxes that will only fit insulin. So insulin-shaped letters, if you like, or messages saying, open the gates. So if an insulin hormone molecule or letter fits into the envelope, the kind of the letterbox on the cell membrane and binds, the message it delivers is open the gate to let sugar in. Very simple. Now, imagine you are that insulin receptor, and every now and again you get a message saying open the gate to let sugar in. You're like, sure, I'll open the gate. But now imagine that the person whose body you're in has just eaten 20 donuts, and maybe, a couple of hot chocolates. And suddenly there's this kind of flood of sugar coming in. So you kind of open the gate, you let some in, you've got enough now. And you're like, but you keep getting bombarded. And you're like, no, I'm not going to get any more in. So instead, it gets converted into glycogen or into fat. Now, if this happens repeatedly, so a one-off kind of donut binge, not a problem. But if this is happening repeatedly, time and time and time and time again, eventually you as the insulin letterbox are going to get fed up with this, and you're going to nail the letterbox shut. So now, when that person eats sugar, the sugar tries to get into the cell by triggering insulin to open the cell gate, but the insulin can't get in. The letterbox is now shut. The sugar gates don't open. So what happens there is we end up being tired, but we don't just need energy to feel energetic. We need energy to carry out lots of physiological processes in the body. So lots of stuff starts going wrong, basically. And then we end up with loads of excess insulin and glucose in the bloodstream. So we'll be storing some of it, but we'll just end up with excess insulin that can't do its job properly, in particular. And both of those things, excess sugar and excess insulin, will create inflammation. Now, inflammation is beneficial from time to time. If you've cut yourself and you need to heal a wound, for example, inflammation is what will keep you alive. But persistent long-term inflammation, that's the foundations to chronic illness, chronic disease, persistent illnesses. So it could be cardiovascular disease, it could be dementia, it could even be depression. Lots of studies have linked depression to inflammation in the brain, or brain fog. It could be digestive issues. It could be skin problems, aches and pains. There's all sorts of things that are related to inflammation. So we don't want to be contributing to this. And this is one of the key reasons why we want to regulate the sugar that we're eating. So the sugar isn't the bad thing. Sugar isn't bad. It's how we're eating it and how we're responding to it that can be problematic. And then that can have all sorts of offshoots. Once we deprive those cells of the sugar, it has impacts on various different metabolic processes. And we have this whole host of conditions that we call metabolic disease that include cancer, diabetes, and cardiovascular health issues, but probably loads more besides. So how was that?
That was amazing. It just makes it so clear. And then we kind of look at what you've just said about sugar on the everyday body. And then let's reframe that into the menopausal body. So okay. now we've got like the estrogen levels might be high or low. You might be estrogen dominant, or your estrogen might be quite low. Your testosterone might have gone through the roof if you're at the beginning, and as it trails down, your progesterone is kind of gradually declining. And let's be honest, estrogen doesn't know what it's doing until the end of your menopause anyway. It's up, down, all over the place. So you've got these things which one of the kind of, you tend to get more inflammation anyway during menopause. So if you've got inflammation from menopause and then you're smashing your body with sugar as well, adding to that inflammation, it's not going to be particularly great, is it? But the other thing that you also mentioned as well was you said about the other diseases. And I mean, you've got things like Alzheimer's, which is known as type 3 diabetes. So, if you are smashing the sugar anyway, not particularly great for you. But if you're going through those hormonal changes again, inflammation around the brain areas you've mentioned, we're putting ourselves at more risk of kind of brain health issues as well. So, I mean, one thing that I've definitely, it would impact me, and I think if I hadn't have given up sugar kind of in 2012, I definitely would have had heart health issues. Because the other thing that, with the sugar, people just think of sugar as making you get a bit fat and like the diabetes, but they don't actually look at cholesterol as well, because the cholesterol builds up from sugar, doesn't it not?
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's emerging that cholesterol seems to often be an inflammatory issue, especially when you've got inflammation going on in the blood vessels. and you've got a real lack of integrity there, the kind of cholesterol that's carried by LDL, for example, is heading towards the cells and the cell membranes and the blood vessel linings. And we've got to ask ourselves why. Why is the body choosing to send more cholesterol there? And if it's the blood vessel lining, could it be that actually there's a lack of integrity there? There's a problem, there's an inflammation problem there, or there's maybe something that's putting too much pressure on the blood vessels and they are getting thinner and danger of rupturing. That would be really bad news. So let's put together the ingredients that we need to make some plaque. So some cholesterol, some calcium, some other bits and pieces, and make some plaque that's going to be a kind of inner scaffolding. Or are we sending cholesterol in the form of LDL to the cells because we somehow want to make the cells more, kind of give them a bit more of a barricade? We tend to do that as a stress response. There tends to be more cholesterol in the cell lining, which means less movement in and out of the cell. And it's really what we do in any kind of stress response. We tense up, we protect. Is it part of the cells trying to do the same thing? There's still more that we need to understand about all of that. All of this is emerging science. When I say emerging, over the past few decades, but it's a slow process. But yeah, there are lots of things going on there, and it's really interesting you've brought this up as well, because for World Menopause Day this year, the theme was cardiovascular health. And post-menopause, our cardiovascular risk goes through the roof. And it's something that's not really considered. We tend to think of it as something that affects men more. But really, that's not the case. We all need to be looking after our cardiovascular health. And this is a really big factor. And as you said, our hormone balance, and specifically estrogen, throughout our fertile years plays a really protective role in all of this. So once that starts fluctuating and then declines, we've lost that. We need to put extra support in place.
Absolutely. I always maintain, and I remember talking to my sister-in-law years ago, and she still remembers it. We were talking, this is before I became a menopause coach, but we were talking about like aging well and going through menopause. And I was like, the better you are in your early years, your 20s and 30s, the better you look after yourself in terms of heart health, bone density, sugar intake, all that kind of stuff, the better your menopause in theory should be. And then I saw recently, she's Alison, I should have listened to you. I really should have listened to you, because she's like, now I'm hot flushing and this is happening and whatever. So yeah, I always kind of maintain that it's like, if you start early enough and look after yourself, you don't just wait until it all happens. The earlier you do it, the less likely it is to happen.
Absolutely. So we've covered you're going to be in a much better place.
We've covered cholesterol. We've looked at heart health a little bit. We've looked at insulin resistance and why we need the sugar as well. So, and let's bring it back to the brain fog very quickly, because I've had brain fog during menopause. I'm perimenopausal, and I went through a phase when I didn't have any periods for about 7 months, and I thought, yes, it's done. And then it all came back. But I did have really terrible brain fog for a bit, and now it seems to have passed. But at the time, I was just like, it got to the point when I literally couldn't remember clients' names and things. And you're like, well, I've been training her for 5 years. Why can't I remember my names wrong? But with the brain fog, obviously, because you've got the estrogen receptors in the brain, and if you have less estrogen going in, obviously the brain can't function as well. That's going to impact you during menopause. But then if you add on like your lower energy levels, because the brain's not getting enough energy because your insulin resistance, it's going to smash you a little bit more, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. It really is. And there's been studies showing that, we reach for the sugar when we feel like we need to really concentrate. If you're tired and you're on a long car journey, then you're going to reach for the stimulants, whether that's sugar or coffee, but sugar will do it. And in the short term, it will help you focus more. But in the long term, studies have shown that actually it will decrease your cognitive ability. Those sugar hits and crashes are just no good for that. So it's an immediate stimulant, but long term, like any stimulant, it's going to have a detrimental effect. And it's also one thing that I find quite interesting about brain fog as well is so sugar is going to have an impact on gut health. And also gut the balance of the gut microbiome, so the microbes, the bacteria and other microbes in the gut, their balance can sometimes have an impact on how much sugar we're craving, because some of them feed on sugar and get us craving sugar as well. And if our gut's in such a state that we're not absorbing nutrients particularly well, and if our metabolic health is in a state where we're not kind of really getting as much energy from those those nutrients as we could do, so we're lacking in those nutrients, then we're going to experience brain fog. And one thing that can really be helpful for some of those people is a substance called phosphatidylcholine. And phosphatidylcholine is a substance that's in sunflower lecithin and the lecithin that you find in egg yolks, and it's in liver as well. And what it's really good at is those tight junctions that make up the lining of the small intestine. It helps to give the small intestine its integrity back. So where you've got dysbiosis and inflammation in the gut, it can lead to leaky gut, which means all sorts of things can get into the bloodstream and create inflammation and havoc and chaos throughout the body. And some of those things could then go through the blood-brain barrier as well and create like a leaky blood-brain barrier. And phosphatidylcholine seems to be able to help with that as well. And it's really great for nerve cells. So brain cells actually communicating with each other. The cell membranes themselves are more fluid because of things like phosphatidylcholine. So that can be a real game changer for some people. It doesn't work for everybody because different people have different things going on. But for some people, it really can be helpful.
That's fascinating. And actually, I mean, having done some of your education, and I remember one of the things you're saying about having that seeds, sunflower seeds. So in my morning breakfast is always a mix of gluten-free oats, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, and chia seeds, some soya yogurt, a little bit of coconut milk, and maybe a sprinkling of fresh fruit, but like low sugar. And it's literally, it's got all your key nutrients that you need to set you up that are really good for menopause. So, and it's not shop bought. I literally make it myself because everything in the shop is full of sugar.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I do. And if it's not full of sugar, they'll put so much dried fruit in it, might as well be.
Exactly, yes. And I remember I was standing in Sainsbury's the other day and there was a lady faffing around the cereal aisle with her friend going, oh, I don't want one with sugar, too much sugar. And she was going through and I said, just don't bother looking. I said, just go over there, buy a bag of seeds, buy mixed seeds, go and throw some oats in the oven, just lightly toast it with some coconut oils and sprinkle some cinnamon in. It's going to taste way nicer than that. And it's going to be way better for you too.
Probably cheaper as well.
Yeah, and cheaper. Yeah, no, it's very expensive now. Yeah. I mean, you can get ones that are supposedly sugar-free and they're sweetened with inulin, but it's kind of, they're meant to be better for gut health, but with some people that stuff goes straight through them. So I know if I eat that, it makes me bloat really badly. I can't.
Yeah, it can be a bit FODMAPy, that one.
Yeah. So we've kind of covered a lot of the things where sugar can impact the menopause. Are there any areas that I've missed before we reiterate what sugar is as well?
Well, there's so many areas. I mean, once you start talking about the microbiome, you're talking about the whole immune system because it is the front line of the immune system. So it can really impact, how well you deal with infections and illnesses as well. But yeah, I mean, pretty much everything you can think of, how well we breathe, how well we see, how well we think, how well we move, all of those things can be impacted. But we can really kind of bring it, you can focus on, I've done a big focus today on inflammation, but you can also focus on the impact of sugar as a stimulant as well, and how that's going to be impacting your nervous system and keeping you in that kind of hyper-aware stress mode for some people as well, which is going to have a detrimental impact on other bodily processes. I mean,
of course, yeah, if your cortisol levels are elevated anyway, and then you spike it with sugar, you're going to get to a point when your adrenal glands get absolutely, start taking over. And then
Yeah.
we
And
lead
when
to
you
adrenal fatigue, don't we?
exactly, and when you think three of the most common things I hear about as menopause and perimenopause symptoms are insomnia and anxiety and hot flushes, and all of those things can be worsened by stimulants.
Mm. And actually, I have a client that was suffering from anxiety, and she didn't know whether it was like palpitation, didn't know if it was a thyroid issue. And then she decided to cut out sugar, sorted it.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, just like within a week, she's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not eating sugar anymore. And it sorted it. So it's interesting because, yes, you mentioned the anxiety, and I've been generally a very calm person. But during menopause, during my perimenopause journey, I have suffered from anxiety. And like I'll wake up and just be anxious for no reason whatsoever. And I don't even know what it's about. But,
Mm-hmm.
you know, for me, I generally do a bit of meditation, and I take some ashwagandha if I'm kind of a bit off the roof. But
Ashwagandha can be such a lifesaver. And
it's
also back to the
amazing.
gut microbiome again, because there are so many neurotransmitters produced by the gut microbes, including things like GABA and acetylcholine, that can be really calming for the nervous system. So keeping all of that in balance is really key.
So, well, there's so much. I mean, I know both of us could talk about this for hours, but we've kind of covered the brain health, hormonal balance. We've covered digestive system, inflammation, which can affect joint pain and things like that as well. So, I mean, there's lots and lots of it, and I like to focus on the positives. And one of the positive things we can do is actually recognize what sugar is, because so many places and products are marketed as no added sugar, low sugar. And actually they're not. And if you're not sure, there is a brand called SugarWise, a label, which is a global certification. And if the product has that label on, it means it's certified in low in sugar or no added sugar. So both my recipe books have been certified with them. So that's one thing you can do. But it's also good to know the names of the sugars as well. So, I mean, you've got the obvious things where you've kind of got like refined sugar, and then you've got like all these sugar alternatives, which are supposedly meant to be more low GI, and like coconut, palm sugar, argov. Argov, even when I was eating sugar, used to send me over the edge because it's just
Really high
fructose.
fructose. Yeah.
Oh, it killed me. I had an
And
argov ice cream, and honestly, I could eat half, and I felt so sick and so tired. I was at work, and I felt like I had to lie on the floor and just die. I felt so bad on it.
the thing about most of the agave syrups out there as well is they're really fructose dominant. They have quite high levels of fructose. So and fructose can't go straight into the cells. It has to be converted into glycogen first and then be released to be sent to the cells. But it still triggers insulin. So it's much more likely to lead eventually to insulin resistance than other types of sugar.
Yeah, so also there's coconut palm sugar. You've got people say, "Oh, I just do maple syrup, honey." Dates. That's my biggest beef. I used to love dates, but they've got the highest glycemic load of all the fruits, isn't it? And so often you see things that are like sugar-free, gluten-free bars. Yay, let's have a look. Oh, dates, first ingredient. And Kirsten and I were just talking about this before we started. You'll look at it and it'll say dates, and then it'll say rice syrup, and then you'll have some sultanas as well to give it extra sweetness. And that's the first three ingredients. And I don't know if you're aware that if you look at an ingredient label, you have the proportion of the ingredient kind of goes from big to small on the label. So if you're starting off with dates, and then you're moving on to rice syrup, and then you're moving on to sultanas, your first three ingredients of the highest proportion are all sugar, sugar, and sugar. So just be aware of that. You've also got things like fructose syrup. You've got lactose, maltose, rice syrup, which is often marketed as sugar-free or low sugar, not. Any others I've missed, Kirsten? There's so many, aren't there?
Oh,
Really?
there's loads out there. So if there's an ingredient you don't recognize, look it up. It might not be a dodgy ingredient, but at least make sure you know what it is.
Yeah. So before we conclude, I always like to ask the people that are speaking on these to give maybe 2 or 3 top tips on how to kind of manage sugar, or top tips to help you with sugar and menopause.
Okay, so my first one is breakfast. Always make sure there's a good amount of protein in your breakfast. And there's been a real trend recently for intermittent fasting, time restricted eating, which is fantastic. But actually, the more that women are studied, it's emerging that actually it's not a great idea for women to skip breakfast, especially women who are still menstruating or going through perimenopause. I think it's because we respond to stress differently. We respond to the lack of food as a stress in a different way. But actually, there's also emerging research that it may not be so great for anyone to skip breakfast. So if you're doing intermittent fasting or time restricted eating, just move the whole thing earlier. So try having an early breakfast and then finishing with an early dinner and see how that works for you. And so having that protein rich early breakfast might help to keep blood sugar levels stable and keep your physiological processes just better functioning throughout the day. It's a real circadian way of fasting. You look up circadian fasting as well. And the other thing is to then dress your carbs is a really great thing to do. So if you're having something sweet or something that you think is quite carb rich, don't just have it on its own, have it with some protein. Make sure there's plenty of fiber with it. There's a massive difference between eating an apple and juicing that apple and just having the juice. The fiber helps to slow how the sugar enters the bloodstream. So anything you can do to help that. Fiber will help. Polyphenols will help. So dark berries are great because there's not a great deal of sugar in them, and they've also got lots of polyphenols and fiber that help slow down how that sugar enters your bloodstream. And if you have them with something like some nuts and seeds at the same time, so you're dressing your carbs, then that's most likely going to have a much lower impact on your blood sugar. So I think they're probably my best tips. And again, if if you just want to have something really sweet, have it straight off, like after dinner, have it straight after dinner rather than leaving it an hour and having it while you're watching the telly in the evening. There you go.
That's really good. Thank you very much. So, I mean, we could talk about this for ages. So if you do have specific questions and you want to know more about this, then you'll, in the email that we send out with this recording, you'll get all our contact details as well. So you can always contact us. I know Kirsten's doing lots of other webinars as well on different topics, so you can always find her. And of course, she's got a book that you can always read as well. So yes, so she has a wonderful nutrition book. And I also have, I'm not quite as handy, I don't think I've got my books handy with me. I also have 2 recipe books, which are all gluten, dairy, sugar, sugar-free eating. And they're all things that I've developed myself. So literally, and I still make a lot of them now, they're my staples. So between us, I'm pretty sure that we can help you with recipes and nutrition and things like that. So before we go, I'm just going to check, does anyone have any questions? Kirsten, is anything else you'd like to add?
I think we've covered the main things, really. I mean, we could go off into another 20-minute tangent about something, but I
It's
think
so easy.
the take home is to, don't be scared of sugar. It's not the big, bad, evil thing, but just keep it in its place. Make sure it's not having a detrimental impact on you. And listen to your body. Listen to your body and trust it.
Yeah, I think that the same thing goes for me as well. Whilst I don't eat refined sugar at all, it's because my body hates it. Like if I eat refined sugar, I start burping like crazy. I get really bad shooting stomach pains. And it's just, yeah, my body just goes no. And that's the thing. I stopped eating sugar because I had quite bad gut dysbiosis, but I didn't recognize it. I was having porridge with honey on and then a fruit smoothie for breakfast. So I was probably eating most of my day's calories in breakfast. And I was like, oh, I'm a fitness instructor. I can eat this. I need all this energy. Actually, no, I didn't. And I gave myself nausea, brain fog, compromised immune system, abdominal pain, bloating, constantly having colds, low energy, grumpy, acne. I was on the pill for diet, for acne. All of that was sugar. So, listen to your body, and like sometimes we have head in the sand. You're just like, oh, it's, I'm not eating too much sugar. Just be honest with yourself. And, I'm not saying you don't deprive yourself, because life without cake, I'll be honest, is horrible. Yeah. So I've done that. But at the same time, just be mindful of, when you eat sugar, how you eat sugar, and, don't be fooled by the sugar-free bars and the super healthy so-called fruit smoothies, which are just like sugar dumps. And that's a bit. Thank you very much for giving up your evenings. Thank you, Kirsten, for taking your time out of your massively busy diary to speak with us today. If you have any questions, get in contact with us. We'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, have a wonderful evening. Thank you very much.